Florida Governor Ron DeSantis kicked off his presidential campaign yesterday in Iowa and took aim at Donald Trump and President Biden. DeSantis said that he'll fight back against Trump after recent criticism by the former president. The CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe has more from Iowa. Good morning.
Good morning. Governor DeSantis is set for a full day of campaign stops across Iowa, 4 of them from west to east, before he heads to New Hampshire and South Carolina later this week, then comes back here over the weekend. He continues to trail former President Donald Trump, both here in Iowa and across the country, in part because the former president is relentlessly attacking his one-time ally. But now, DeSantis is not holding back.
Our great American comeback starts by sending Joe Biden back to his basement in Delaware.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis kicking off his presidential bid in Iowa by vowing to make the rest of the country more like the Sunshine State.
In Florida, we chose freedom over Fauciism, and we are better for doing that.
Addressing several hundred supporters, the governor touted what he's done in recent months, restricting access to abortion services, loosening gun laws, and banning state colleges and universities from spending public funds on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs.
In Florida, we didn't lead with merely words. We followed up our words with deeds. And we have produced a record of accomplishment that we would put up against anybody in this country.
DeSantis is now hitting back at former President Donald Trump, who continues to lead the GOP field by double digits. The governor especially taking issue with recent comments by the former president, who suggested the state of New York, run by Democrats, handled the COVID-19 pandemic better than Florida.
Yes, the criticism is ridiculous, but it is an indication that the former president would double down on his lockdowns from March of 2020.
While Trump is also set to campaign in Iowa today and Thursday, so are other 2024 hopefuls, who along with DeSantis are attending a major GOP event Saturday hosted by Iowa Senator Joni Ernst. But DeSantis has a big advantage, a super PAC already spending tens of millions of dollars on ads in early primary states.
We fight the woke in the schools.
And on reaching Iowa voters face to face.
We look forward to your vote for Governor DeSantis in February.
Tim Hurst is among dozens of people being paid by the DeSantis super PAC to go door to door for the governor. He's come from Illinois to make the case.
It's just time for this to end. I'd like to see all Americans just be reunited again.
Tim told me he voted twice for the former president, but now believes that DeSantis can unite the country and move it forward. We will wait and see whether Trump has anything to say about what DeSantis had to say about his attacks when he makes appearances here in Iowa later today and tomorrow. And Marie and Nancy, mark your calendars. There are just 524 days to go until Election Day 2024.
Oh, thank you very much. I will not be marking my calendar, though, Ed. Thanks. All right. So joining us now for more on the 2024 presidential race is Joel Payne. He's the Chief Communications Officer for Move On and a CBS News political contributor. And with him is CEO of the Vogel Group, Alex Vogel. He's also a former counsel for the National Republican Senatorial Committee. Thanks for joining us, both of you guys. All right. So let us start with Ron DeSantis sort of kicking off his campaign. Yesterday, he was in Iowa, and he spoke in regards to a 2-term presidency. I want to play some of what he had to say.
And let's just be clear, it really does take 2 terms as president to be able to finish this job. The bureaucracy is so entrenched that I think we can bring George Washington back, and I don't think he could fix it in one single 4-year term.
All right, so Alex, I want to ask you about sort of his strategy here. I understand that, it's the primary and it's to make it out of the primary. So the campaign style that we hear now could be different from a potential national campaign. But what is this business about? There's so much damage done that I'm probably going to need 2 terms.
Well, there's an old expression that any 2-term presidency is a successful presidency, and that may have been what Governor DeSantis was alluding to. Part of this process on the primary side is not only contrasting Governor DeSantis with President Trump and other candidates, but also laying out for all Americans of any party or political persuasion the challenges that he hopes to address. And I think that's what he was getting at here with the 2-term reference.
And Joel, what stood out to you about his remarks yesterday? I know that I had asked Ed O'Keefe if the word woke came up at all, because I thought perhaps he might shift some of his word choices as he moves further along in this process. But he said, no, he did bring up wokeism.
Yeah, that seems to be his fastball, his go-to pitch. I think what stood out to me was it does seem like the gloves have come off a bit. Governor DeSantis does seem more comfortable going after President Trump, although he won't say his name. That's interesting. Did you notice that the former president, the previous president before President Biden, but not saying his name? And that's because I think he knows still how popular President Trump is.
Right.
I think what he's also trying to figure out, and his team is trying to figure out, is while they know that Donald Trump is the front runner, is he inevitable? Do people feel, does he have the strong grip on the Republican Party that he's had before? It's one thing to peak early and be the front runner. We've seen a lot of people peak early in previous races. Can you hold on to that type of momentum for 15, 18 months through a primary and through a general election? That is yet to be determined.
Right. And, in the meantime, there are additional candidates that are preparing for, a run. And we're sort of learning about one. CBS News has learned that Chris Christie will announce his presidential campaign next week. So this is interesting, Joel, because Chris Christie, clearly a former ally of the president, he seems to be indicating, the former president, he seems to be indicating that his one of his tactics is going to be a full-throated attack on Donald Trump, which is he's not seeing coming from other candidates.
I'm sure many people who have been traumatized by the last 7 years of American life are grateful for the apparent sacrifice of former Governor Christie. And I'll say that as my former governor. I'm a New Jerseyan. But I'll just say this. This is the part of the primary where I like to play the game called, what's my constituency? And that's the question that Chris Christie has to ask himself. By the way, that's the question that a lot of those other Republicans have to ask themselves. If you're Mike Pence, if you're Nikki Haley, you have to ask yourself, what's your constituency? So for Chris Christie, the constituency is never Trumpers / people who are just tired of Trump. Maybe they voted for him in 16 or 20, but they're tired of him, kind of like the person who Ed featured in the package that you showed before. Is that enough to win a Republican primary? I think probably not. I think probably Christie is a bit of a stalking horse for some other Republicans who can land some blows on Donald Trump in a way that maybe other Republicans aren't uniquely set up to do. But he is not in a position to win the Republican primary. And as long as he knows that, I say go for it, have fun.
Yeah, Alex, same question to you. Listen, the former president's, double digits ahead of his closest sort of rival, which would be Ron DeSantis. What is Chris Christie thinking? Well, not actually what he's thinking. I know you can't read his mind, but,
As Ed noted, 524 days to go, a long way, very long. I know we're all talking about it now, and it's great that we're back to Iowa and soon to New Hampshire. But I think for candidates, and this includes Governor Christie, among others, a lot of this is getting yourself into that process and hopefully on that debate stage. A lot of things can happen. There have been a lot of candidates who were on both parties. Howard Dean comes to mind, who were early and strong and seemed inevitable. But if you can inject yourself into that conversation and make the case for your candidacy, things can happen. And I think Governor Christie, who obviously ran before, I don't know that he views his campaign as just a stalking horse for a faction of the party. I think he wants to use that as an issue to get into the conversation and see where it leads with the American people.
The Atlanta Journal-Constitution is reporting that former President Donald Trump and former Vice President Mike Pence are both going to be speaking at Georgia's GOP convention in June. I think this is sort of interesting because thus far, most, serious candidates have kind of, it appears as if have either deliberately or just by scheduling avoided crisscrossing with Donald Trump's path, if you will. How will they attempt to appeal to the voters in what is a very crucial state for both men? Alex.
So I'm actually joining you this morning in the shadow of the Reagan Ranch, and one of President Reagan's great lines was the 11th commandment, thou shalt not speak ill of another Republican. As you noted, more and more of these candidates inevitably are going to start crossing paths, and somewhat awkwardly. And the fact that Vice President Pence and former President Trump are going to be in that mix, not for the first time together, it will definitely be interesting. It's going to be fascinating to see how those two in particular navigate their past together, as well as their potential arguments about the future in front of candidates. But there is no doubt this is ultimately a binary choice exercise that all of these folks are engaged in, and they're going to have to talk about not only their own arguments for why they should be in this position, but frankly, address why others should not be. And it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, it will. Joel Payne and Alex Vogel, thank you so much, gentlemen.